is sometimes difficult. So whatever avenue people find to make money, they'll jump at it. But I think if the interest is too much, that should raise a red flag and you should say, okay, how come this is too easy to make money? And those should be the questions the public should be asking before they invest in this kind of schemes. Okay, in terms of what cryptocurrencies are, I think I'll skip this slide. Most of the morning presentations talked about what they are, the volatility, the supply and demand, and that they're peer-to-peer. We also talked about the blockchain, which is 10 minutes. And in that blockchain, we have miners who are doing the actual mining, and they get the rewards. And that's how the consensus comes about, and that's why the blockchain is legitimate. At the moment, it's 4.5 bitcoins for every reward. And like was said, every 4 years that will reduce it to half. But in terms of the properties, these Bitcoin limitations of 12.5 bitcoins per miner, and it's limited to 1 MB of data per block and 10 minutes. This is what the other cryptocurrencies are trying to capitalize on. There are other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, which has reduced that time. And they're saying, why wait for 10 minutes in the block? They want to make it less than that. So all those parameters come into play. And programmers all over the world are trying to work on those properties and come up with better cryptocurrencies. But still, at the moment, Bitcoin still has the highest market capitalization. So the history was after the 2008 global financial crisis, that's when that famous paper from Satoshi Nakamoto came online, and people built on that protocol. As at today, that's my Coinbase account. The exchange rate to Zambian kwacha is 63,000 kwacha. And as we are trying to learn about these, we've tried to walk into meetings and find out what people are being told. One of the common things being sold are the value of a Bitcoin. So they'll tell this investor that 1 Bitcoin is worth 23,000 kwacha. In Zambian kwacha, that can buy you a small car, you can start a business. So that gets people excited. And that way people want to jump in, people want to get on this bandwidth, and people want to invest their money in that. So you find that such kind of statistics are true, but for a common person, once you look at it and you have a little bit of money from your pension to invest, you think that's the way to go. But what we're saying is we need to learn a little bit more before we can make such kind of investments. In terms of the common variants, those are the common variants at the moment. There's Ripple, there's Ethereum, and there's good research going on Ripple because it's being used as a test because it's somehow decentralized, but there's some central banks who are trying it out to see if they can come up with a central bank controlled blockchain where it's not distributed, it's somehow centralized, but still the concepts are the same. The transaction fees will be lower, and then they're trying to capitalize on that. Ethereum also has got a lot of great works happening at the moment, and like you can see, the block time changes. So from 10 minutes on Bitcoin, it's 5 seconds for Ripple and 5 seconds for Ethereum. So all those properties are the ones that lead to so many of these cryptocurrencies coming up. In terms of the blockchain, it's simply a distributed ledger, which is mutable because you've got a lot of parties are seeing it, and once you mine those transactions and it gets written in the blockchain, it becomes somehow immutable. But it's got that, but the principles are the same old ledger we used to use, just that it's electronic and it's decentralized. So you don't have one person control it, but the whole blockchain network has a bird's view of this blockchain technology. In terms of the stages themselves, I think we've talked about all these. It's a peer-to-peer network, so meaning I can transact directly with the neighbor who's got a laptop and connected to the internet. It uses algorithms, which is hashing, where you have the cryptography as transactions are being moved across. Then it sits on this immutable blockchain, which is a ledger, and you have to have consensus from the miners to have those transactions written to the block. In terms of the benefits are enormous. The most notable ones are the low transaction costs, because now there are models that are being formulated where you can do cross-border trading, but the transactions are minimal. If you can compare with other services like MoneyGram and Western Union, find that the transaction fees are a little bit higher. So in terms of advantages, if the blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies is explode, you would see that we might find cheaper ways of moving volumes. And for us as a central bank, we want financial inclusion. We want people to be financially included so they can have they can be formally included in the financial inclusion. And then there's been research which shows that with financial inclusion, you can plan better. With financial inclusion, you can plan for the next farming season. With financial inclusion, you can save as compared to just keeping money under the bed. So you've got better control of your life because you can save and you can grow that money when you're financially included. In terms of the application, there's a lot of applications that are being used here, and locally we have blockchain being used for titling of land. That way, when you get your title deeds and it's written to the block, that becomes immutable. So those cases where you have two different people fighting over the same piece of land, those are somehow being eliminated, and that is a use case we're using currently in Zambia. So the Ministry of Lands is using blockchain to try to put all the titles on the block, meaning the blockchain will be decentralized. So if I am trying to get a piece of land, I can actually go on that blockchain and look at the transaction history, because to show who owned it, when they owned it, when the property was changed hands, and that makes it legitimate. Other notable use cases are like Ethereum. Ethereum now is being used for smart contracts. Smart contracts are just basically self-executing contracts. If we enter into an agreement and there's a default or a breach, that contract will auto-execute. If the contract says, if you breach this contract, you pay me $200, that will auto-execute and that takes precedence. So we've seen a lot of application in smart contracts. The other application are with precious minerals. They're trying to track diamonds from source, and then you know the ownership of the diamond as it passes on from one ownership to another. That way, it's some way of trying to eliminate these conflict diamonds, and I think that's a very good application as well. Also, another good application is in fine arts, because these paintings, sometimes you find that a painting is compromised and you won't know how legitimate it is. So once you put that painting on the blockchain, meaning the history of that painting will be traced from the source to who owned it next to the next owner. So that brings authenticity to the arts. Meaning if there's an auction and the painting is being auctioned, you can actually trace how this painting has moved or has changed hands. Other notable applications are digital identity, digital signatures. The blockchain is being used for these applications as well. In terms of the merits include the potential to increase efficiency of payments and reduce transaction costs, which I've already alluded to. There's a potential for financial inclusion. You want people, if they understand this technology, to get on board and try to use it to move funds around and make some savings. They're used to facilitate micropayments, small payments. You don't want to make a small payment across borders and they charge you an arm and a leg. So it can facilitate such small transactions, especially in war-torn countries where you've got refugees crossing borders. So this helps a lot because you can have small amounts of money being sent across borders without attracting huge charges. And like was mentioned earlier, the blockchain is secure because it gets consensus from all the other miners. It gives you that comfort zone that you can legitimately transact on the block. In terms of demerits, just like with like fiat currency, fiat currency can be used for good things and bad things. Fiat currency already is used to buy drugs, for child trafficking, for all the other illicit activities. Same with cryptocurrencies. But with cryptocurrencies, there's what's called the dark web. The dark web is simply the internet, which is anonymous. It uses what are called onion routers, meaning you can't trace how the transaction moved. And people have taken advantage of that dark web, and they're using it to transact. Other disadvantages are because it's the users are not known. We just have the public and private keys. It's very difficult to regulate because there's no KYC. There's no know your customers. I can't go and register my name and NRC except I'm going through an exchange such as Coinbase, where they'll require my ID, and that way for regulators, that's like the entry point of regulation. You can start regulating by looking at the end of the network. But in terms of the block itself, it's very difficult to come up with any regulations there. Other disadvantages are price volatility. Price volatility, well, you can't use it as, it doesn't qualify to have all the three properties of currency, so, because the price changes unbound. And with the fact that it can be used on the dark web, it can be used for other illicit activities like ransom claims, human trafficking, child trafficking, and all those things. And the fact that there's no central authority, meaning once you transact, you're on your own. If I open my Bitcoin wallet and I transact with an exchange that goes down or becomes bankruptcy in the US, that means I can't go to the central bank and ask them to get my money back. So that's gone. So we're trying to educate the masses and tell them, these are the facts. Cryptocurrencies and cryptocurrency assets are here to stay. You can join them. People are using them already, but it's at your own risk because you won't have a central repository to fall back on. So it's a technology that's evolving. It's here to stay. We have to learn as much as we can and control it and make the best use of it. And I think at this point I'll turn it over to my colleagues to talk about legal concerns, compliance, and risks of cryptocurrencies. Are there any questions before I? Over to you.